So we are live here on the broadcast, and let's see here. All right. And I'm going to be talking about the update. And the update is going to be about the current politics and UFOs here in the U.S. We have all kinds of interesting news happening, also some scary stuff. Of course, that's possible right now with potential lead up to war, and all this stuff that we've known has been possible. And this has been known and sort of predicted by me last year. This entire period of time from these, with these eclipses are very, ripe with kinetic danger, you might say. Certainly with international trouble and problems, and particularly right now, as we move into the height of this, of this eclipse season, there's enormous potential for difficulty and even, unfortunately, things like war. Now we see the chart here being shown, and this chart shows this was a few days ago. Let me move this forward here. We step it forward. This is June 19th, June 20th. We're moving up here. So we're in this eclipse phase right now because, at least starting right here, we're in the lunation cycle now where these eclipses are important, because the next lunation in a couple weeks on July 2nd will be the solar eclipse. So now the luminaries are in the jaws of the eclipse, so to speak. And this, these possibilities are very hot right now, and I've spoken about them for this entire year and even into last year. I see a lot of people here. Roxanne Miller is here. Things are heating up. And Tim Barnes is here from Northern California. Angela Oliver, Aussie's in the house. Bawani Aroso made it. Judith, Australia here. So quite a few Aussies here. Pamela Kay from Colorado. Jedlari, Ghana. Sorry, I don't know how to say that name very well. So it is some interesting times right now. Victoria says hello. And so it's some big transformative shifts happening. And also Daphne Smith is here from Cincinnati, trying to get everybody. So thanks for showing up, folks, last minute. I don't usually announce because I'm not really sure when I'm going to take to the airwaves, because it's, you can't always know in advance. But we see this chart and we see these nodes. And in fact, Mars is about to move out of Gemini. If I update this chart to where it is right now we're on the 21st. Well, right now we're on the 20th as I record this. On the 21st, Mars leaves Gemini and goes into Cancer, where it will become debilitated. Mercury has already just left Cancer. It's like just poking its head in Cancer now. So Mercury has left Gemini. Then we're going to have Mars and Mercury in Cancer, where Mars is debilitated. Now, I tend to think that is going to be, overall, at least as it relates to war and explosiveness, it's going to minimize that potential. I think a lot of the most explosive potential was the last few days or last week or so, which was when we had all of that, the boat explosion on the Japanese boat, and all of that stuff blew up in Iran right before the full moon. That, again, I stated that these times right here that we're experiencing now would be some of the most dangerous as the moon moved toward debilitation and Mars and Rahu were exact. So this last week, since about the 13th, 14th, 15th, that's when we had some of the most potential dangerous times. Again, it can still get very dangerous because we have an eclipse in Ardra Nakshatra, up here very soon, which I'll talk about in a minute. But at least, this rhetoric that we're seeing now, I was very encouraged to see that Trump, I actually have to give him credit. Underneath it all, he doesn't seem to want to get us involved in any more wars. At heart, his instinct is to not escalate these conflicts and to bring people home and things like that. That's a good instinct, to his credit. The worst instinct, though, for him is he's so incompetent and he doesn't know what he's doing. So this is someone who surrounds himself with war hawks, Bolton, Pompeo, and then wonders why we're on the verge of war, because he's so incompetent. He doesn't understand these things. And that's what's very dangerous. You don't rip up the Iran nuclear deal a couple years ago and not see that it's going to lead to something like this. It's very dangerous time right now. And again, it's driven by all kinds of subtleties, but there is definitely some, at least, some potential grace coming, at least grace in the sense that Mars is cleared the node at this point, and you like to see Mars getting less powerful, meaning being in Cancer, being, less charged. Mars, when it went through Ardra and then got really close to Rahu, this is when things are really hot. And now moving into Cancer starts to diffuse the situation. I see we have some other people here. Jeff Poole is here. Can't resist the title. Yeah, I know. And Maverick Maiden. Thanks, Krishna. Kalapurusha Astrology. Peace. Daphne, thank you. Awesome and smart. Thank you for loving my videos. That's great. Tim Barnes, good old Ardra. Right. And we have some other folks. Kalapurusha saying hi to people. And so all kinds of, Roxanne says, hopefully Jupiter's aspect will help and not expand the volatility. Yeah, this could be certainly in the cards. There's no question about it. And these are probably comments in regard to me saying Trump and his incompetence. That's the most dangerous thing, and it is. Where Jalari Ghana says even Republicans say the same, so it's not partisan. No, it's not partisan. This is just always the biggest danger in many ways, even wrecking the economy, the incompetence to think, oh, we'll just trade war and slap tariffs on people to get ourselves out of economic problem. And China will pay for it. Well, China doesn't pay for tariffs. American taxpayers pay for this. Again, just a total misunderstanding of the way any of this stuff works endlessly. So again, at some point, I think what's happening, at least on the war front, is his advisors are trying to goad him into a hot war, and trying to goad him into it and be like, oh, you're not going to let him push you around, are you? You're going to be tough, aren't you? But at some point you back yourself into a corner. There's almost no chips to play. There's almost no bargaining chips. We've torn up the Iran deal. Now we're moving forces into the area. We're ratcheting up the tension. All of these more sanctions, backing them into a corner to where, again, it's just not a good situation. It's hard to know what to do. Now we almost have to retaliate with some kind of measured, symmetrical retaliation, like shooting a missile at their missile launcher that shot down our drone. But then again, once you start firing missiles at each other, it can get crazy. So again, it's a dangerous time. And again, we're in this eclipse cycle right now, particularly as we get close to around here, again, early July, even closer. It could happen anytime, really. this point, we have Saturn's going to be aspecting the moon around here, when the 23rd, 24th, we could see some retaliatory strikes, or maybe hopefully what happens is things calm down, and then maybe there'll be a retaliatory strike or some kind of thing around the time of the eclipse. Maybe that's the next hot thing that happens, and then everything calms down, hopefully. And maybe, as Roxanne said, this aspect from Jupiter onto the moon eventually calms things down a little bit. But these are really going on right now. It's very volatile, difficult situations. I also wanted to show that I, talked about these things quite a bit in the 2019 forecast. Let me see if I can see how this gets a little bigger. You can read it maybe a little better. But, I talked about this time right here. I mean, you can just see, and if you haven't gotten my 2019 forecast yet, it's free. You can go watch it. And these are the 10 things that I looked over. And by the way, we still have quite a bit more to go. Again, I starting here is where, well, actually, even since early March to May 8th, this was when all this Jupiter Mula Gandanta point stuff happened, and when Jupiter was going back and forth between the Jeshta and Mula Gandanta point. We were talking about the, a lot of the explosiveness politically and things like that. Then March 23rd, Rahu moves into Gemini, Ketu in the Sagittarius. I said in the forecast for 2019 that we could have, this is going to be where there's a lot of disclosures, especially around information that helps us see the truth behind all the things we believe. Of course, that includes political beliefs, all kinds of beliefs, very transformative time. Again, and I say March 23rd, it's not that date, it's March 23rd for the next year and a half, because this is Rahu going into Gemini and Ketu going into Sagittarius. So these are the big things that we're looking at right now. Long-term cycle will be beneficial overall, especially for deeper spiritual awakening. Are you feeling that? But it's also a chaotic, transformative section of the sky. Again, this theme of destruction and change. This is when, this is when 9/11 happened. This is also when the very chaotic 2000 U.S. election happened, when there was probably some trickery. Certainly what happened was it wound up going into the Supreme Court. Those who don't remember the 2000 U.S. election, I'll refresh you. Al Gore actually won. He won the popular vote, and he would have won the recount in Florida, except the Supreme Court said stop the recount. Unprecedented. But that was with Rahu and Gemini, and then 2000, and then 9/11 also happened during that same transit. So we're in a time right now that is just as chaotic and transformative as that year when George W. Bush got elected with that crazy, unprecedented recount in the election. And then less than a year later, we had airplanes hit the Twin Towers. Now, again, how transformative was that year and a half? First of all, we almost had another president, which would have been Al Gore. He almost certainly wouldn't have been as incompetent as Bush. I'm sorry to say it. Again, people think it's partisan. It's not partisan. There was warning after warning that was ignored by the government. And again, I'm not going to get into the conspiracy theories behind 9/11. However, I've never seen buildings fall at the rate of gravity before. And I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the transit of Rahu through Gemini, we get actual disclosures and truth that shows maybe not that 9/11 was a clear inside job that the government knew about, but something gets revealed that really sheds new light on the 9/11 event and those buildings, especially those buildings falling at the rate of gravity. Airplanes hitting at the top of the building does not make buildings then fall at the rate of gravity. The top of the building is not that heavy. At some point, the structure of the building would have held. But you watch when those buildings fall, they fall at the rate of gravity, no resistance. Jesse Ventura, who used to be a wrestler and also the governor of Minnesota, has done a lot on that. He used to be involved in demolition, and he used to demolish buildings, and many demolition experts say this building was demolished. And if you watch that video, look if you've ever seen another building fall like that, unless it was a demolition. So that also happened with Rahu in Gemini. And again, it might seem like a conspiracy theory, but it's also, again, evidence. Again, think of watching another building that tall just fall at the rate of gravity, as fast as gravity. So, but we're in the same kind of nature now with this Rahu moving into Gemini and Ketu in the Sagittarius that started at the end of March. So then I said, again, April 10th through October 16th, Saturn and Ketu exact conjunction within 2 degrees. This is from April to October. This Saturn Ketu shows pressure and scrutiny, and yes, destruction and change. There will be a lot of scrutiny brought into your long-term commitments. Many of them began to shift in 2017, but especially those things that you believe, including things like what you believe about the government, what you believe about your leaders. And again, this is also being shown because opposite that is Rahu in Gemini, opposite Ketu in Sagittarius. Rahu in Gemini is bringing all this information that we see now to make us question what we believe. Notice how people's beliefs about the government and the world we live in changed after 9/11. It's almost like before that it was a whole different reality. And then now, as I mentioned, this again, I wrote this was written last November. June 8th through June 15th, Mars Rahu exactly opposite Saturn Ketu. Again, a very similar theme. Mars joins Rahu in exactly opposite Saturn Ketu in conjunction Sagittarius. This will almost certainly show a flashpoint and something explosive and destructive. I said this 6 months ago, more than that, 8 months ago. Look at what we've seen and the danger we're facing right now. This flashpoint, these explosive and potentially very volatile global situations right now, especially as it relates to the potential for war in the U.S., in the Middle East. I don't think it's been this hot that I can remember in a long time. Iran just shot one of our drones out of the sky, and the U.S. is hell-bent on some kind of retaliation. And the president has surrounded himself with warmongers. John Bolton has never met a war he didn't like. These are people that started the Gulf War. And the president has also aligned himself with 2 hardcore regimes that would love nothing more than to see us fight Iran. One is Israel, the other is Saudi Arabia. And Trump has shown no inclination to even question Saudi Arabia and their killing and dismemberment of a U.S. citizen, a U.S. resident and journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Clearly, that was done by the Saudi government. They're mortal enemies of Iran. Of course, so is Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu is naming settlements after Donald Trump, trying to praise and flatter him, like, please attack Iran, please fight Iran, please get into war with Iran, Mr. President. They're just itching for the U.S. to go to war with Iran. And I was very heartened by Trump, and I'll give him credit. I don't think underneath it all he really wants to do that. I don't think underneath it all he's a murderous, suicidal maniac. I think he thinks it's wrong to be in these stupid wars, but he's not. But he's too incompetent. He surrounds himself with warmongers and rips up Iran deal because he wants to get back at Obama, and then wonders why we're on the verge of war. Again, his incompetence is the most dangerous thing. But anyway, this is where we are, and you can see it was clearly shown. Now we have July 2nd, solar eclipse in Gemini, Ardra Nakshatra. This, of course, is a wild solar eclipse in the most destructive section of the zodiac on the galactic planet in the nakshatra ruled by Lord Shiva, the destroyer. This is no joke. This is very dangerous and explosive, again, even by accident, if not by design. So this is why I talked about this last year. And by the way, I also did a 2019 lunar nodes shifting update as well. I should say, webinar as well. And I talked about this in the Lunar Nodes webinar as well. And so, I talked about, and it was a cross comparison of the of this lunar shift, or I'm sorry, of this nodal shift, 19 years ago, 18 years ago, when Rahu went through Gemini, and also the recent shifts of Rahu through Leo and Cancer that we've just experienced. And so, again, this is real stuff. So, as I see a lot of people, showing up here. Appreciate everybody showing up. And we've also, one second, but on another note, things that are very interesting that are happening. We have, I don't know, I've thought this for a while, and I definitely thought it was possible when Rahu went into Gemini, this Rahu-Ketu axis being so lit up on the galactic plane, we now have the aliens, like the government is now taking, testimonial from military pilots who are, reporting their encounters with UFOs. And of course, UFOs are definitely related to Rahu and Ketu. No question about it. They are alien forces. And this is pretty remarkable as we see this, as we get near this eclipse, Rahu and Ketu are expanding our awareness and understanding of the universe we're in, and that perhaps we're being visited. And again, of course, in the rational news media, the way they explain it is things like, well, perhaps these are, these are technologies that we don't know about yet, that maybe it's a secret government flying aircraft that we're not aware of, or maybe that's from another country that we're not sure of. But the pilots that have seen this stuff, they're not stupid. They understand laws of physics and mechanics, like, methods of propulsion and the way aircraft can move within what's possible for us. They're talking about aircraft that move much faster than anything we can, understand, and then make, pivots and turns with certain vectors and, angles that's simply not capable, like accelerating way faster than we can imagine, and then like stopping and then moving like 90 degrees in the next direction, and like kind of moving like a video game. Like this doesn't represent anything that we've ever seen. These reports have been around for decades. And of course, they're that sort of X-Files and, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe these things become declassified and these disclosures come forth. Again, the pilots who have seen these things have been talking about them for years. And, the reason that's more important is than citizens just looking up and seeing stuff is because citizens looking up and seeing stuff can make mistakes all the time, honestly, because many phenomena that we can see in the sky are really just our senses not understanding what we're seeing. Certain kinds of aircraft that are like experimental aircraft. Now, again, that doesn't account for people who claim to have gone on alien spacecraft and all that, which, again, those kinds of stories are very outlandish and hard to verify and all of that. I'm not saying I don't believe it, because that's kind of irrelevant. But what I'm saying is the reason, in my opinion at least, these testimonials from like, trained, pilots, and is because they're first of all, they're up in the sky, and they're in, and they know how to identify. They are doing nothing but identifying aircraft all the time. They're always seeing other aircraft. They see commercial aircraft. They see other military aircraft. They're constantly observing the skies. And when they see something that's that unusual, and there's so many, and they see that much, so many anomalies, and the anomalies have been recorded. You can see some of the anomalies as well. And that it's compelling, especially, a few of the videos have been very compelling. So what I'm hoping happens, and what could definitely happen, is to have all of this declassified. And again, I don't know, and I will say I will give Trump credit or I will give him credit in that I think that he probably, again, I'm not going to say it's because he's incompetent, but there's a point where sort of his innocence and his naivety could be to a great advantage, that because he doesn't respect the need for disclosure or the need to hold all that stuff back, like, for example, an Obama or other politicians would, he might just go, yeah, release it. Who cares? Who cares if everybody finds out about aliens? I mean, it could be a real boon. I mean, his inexperience could be a real benefit in that regard. Because again, I don't know. Again, I don't want to be so critical, but a function of the incompetence is not having the sort of cunning to know that maybe you shouldn't let everybody know that the U.S. government has been sitting on this for, decades. So it would be interesting, and perhaps that may happen. I think it's really possible that, again, some of these disclosures can really show up, especially now with, in this eclipse vortex, because we're in this vortex between Saturn and Ketu and the sun and Rahu, and they're right on the plane of the galaxy. This is the other thing you have to understand. The galactic plane is where, especially, we're having this eclipse in Ardra. Ardra is the nakshatra of the galactic plane. The plane of the galaxy runs right through Ardra. And we're having one at the end of the year also in Mula. And so this next year, the rest of this year and into next year, is very transformative, and maybe seeing some amazing disclosures in what might be seen relative to conspiracies in the government being revealed, not just weird conspiracy theories, but even things like 9/11 and evidence and cover-up, because the 9/11 Commission was a joke. And I will tell you right now, I think, again, I don't go so far as to say it was an inside job that everybody knew. Again, that's saying a lot, because one of the reasons I think I have a hard time with a lot of conspiracy theories is human beings are so incompetent. They can't keep a secret to save their life about almost anything. But the thing that's undeniable, when I see the proof of buildings falling at the rate of gravity, that's a demolition. Those buildings had been previously wired. I think the evidence is clear. The buildings had been previously wired to fall. Now, maybe that was just some other, based on some other incident. I don't know who did it. I don't know if it was necessarily the government did it, but it's clear that those buildings didn't just collapse. The top of the building falling that's heavy, but at some point the structure 10 floors down, 100, 25 floors down, at some point the structure would have held. It doesn't just keep gathering steam. What happens is, as something falls, the more resistance, it slows it down. It doesn't speed it up. Just use your brain. Just think of something heavy falling, and there's something, steel structures supporting it. At some point, as that thing falls, the resistance to everything underneath of it will start to slow it down. But that's not what happened when the Twin Towers fell. Look at the videos again. They fall at the rate of gravity. Everything is breaking underneath the top of the building, collapsing at the rate of gravity. Boom. It fell. The entire building falls in like 5 seconds. It's impossible. It's just impossible. 2 of them. 2 buildings. I mean, I get it, an airplane hit, but that doesn't melt. That doesn't destroy the entire structure. So maybe some disclosures will come out about that, because I definitely think that. I definitely think that was planned. It was a demolition. Plus, you had a whole building fall that wasn't even near I think it's building 4 or something, or I don't actually remember the name, the name of the building. So anyway, but things like that, these conspiracies, and again, they happened the last time the nodes were here. We had the 9/11. That's when the buildings hit. We're back at that same transformative point. So the world is at a point where things are going to shift and transform in ways that we're not so, used to. And yeah, people are saying it gave Bush an excuse to go to war. All of this. Yeah, I totally get it. World Trade Center 7. Yeah. So, so much of that just, you can believe your eyes there, right? No building falls like that unless it's demolished. So again, so I think it's very possible to see some disclosures. And now we're already seeing, again, disclosures of aliens. I mean, these are the other kind of things. Maybe we'll see some major declassification of documents and start to see. And, again, I don't talk about these kinds of things very often because I like to stick with what's real and not get too ungrounded, because astrology can already be ungrounded enough. And I'm sorry to say, but I would even say maybe, too many astrologers veer off into conspiracy theory land and fairy dust land, and the pyramids are, this and that. And again, I'm not saying I don't think that's possible, but when you start mixing too many things, you start to degrade the scholarship of the science. And as people know, I really stay with the science of astrology first, but I have my ideas about things and my theories. But those theories are often based on facts. I look at a lot of facts and evidence and say, that just doesn't make sense. And so I've long felt that, and I don't even think it's a big deal, but people make such a big deal out of it, that there are aliens among us, that we are aliens in our own sense. We are aliens, so to speak. That maybe there was alien seed. That's how human consciousness flowered. I mean, all of it's possible. And it's absolutely possible that alien beings, and again, we say aliens. What does that even mean? We live in a, quote, 3-dimensional world right now, right in front of you, imperceptible to your gross senses, are beings from every dimension that are influencing you, that are there, that are everywhere. And you just can't see them, or you don't have a nervous system that's refined enough to pick them up, to pick up on them, but they're there. And again, one could say I believe this, but I think it's pretty easy to say that I know it, and many know it, especially when you enter states of meditation and your auric field and your boundaries and your understanding of what's not just possible, but what's real is extended, because you're tapping into something deeper than just the gross senses in the world. You realize that everything that has a physical form is the result of incidental energy that is not embodied. Even you're not a physical being. Your physical being is a manifestation of all this spiritual energy. That's what astrology is. We're already even reading this energy that one might call alien, with the planets and all that, or even like your psychology. Where's your psychology? Where is it? Where's the tangible thing? But of course it exists. So invisible energy is everywhere. It's nothing but invisible energy. And so the fact that perhaps there are literally physical aliens who come around and check on us or whatever they're doing, I don't think is really a stretch. The only part I will tell you that often gets me, the part that makes it so I'm not so sure that, or I don't know, that's a little weird, is this kind of, what would I say, this sort of lack of imagination that thinks that if there are beings that were so advanced, like aliens, why would they need to fly around in spaceships? And again, the way my mind works is I think any being that's so advanced as that maybe wouldn't need to fly in a spaceship. I don't know, maybe that's kind of the wrong way to look at it because I'm sort of getting ahead of myself. But that's the part where I'm almost a little more skeptical, because I do know the vast distances that are involved. If beings had to fly here in an aircraft or in a craft, it would take so long if they were just covering distances. So if they did get here, maybe it's through time travel or wormholes or other means of navigation in order to get here. But again, beings that advanced, you would think if they're that advanced, they wouldn't need to be flying around in a big hunk of metal that we could then see. You would think if they're that advanced, they'd be able to hide. Because if they're that advanced, they know what we can see. And if they're unsuspectingly being discovered, again, it's just at some point, it's kind of like my mind gets kind of tripped out on the idea that they're smart enough to have done all this or to get here and too stupid to not be able to hide. Why wouldn't they just, I don't know, find another way to do whatever it is they're doing, or be able to watch us in another way where we couldn't? Oops, you found us. Duh. I don't know. Maybe they're just incompetent on some level too. They're not perfect beings, so who knows? But so it's all very interesting to see or to ponder. So but I do think it's very interesting that we're now seeing these disclosures, and the videos of those flying crafts are really quite interesting. And so I'm looking at the comments, and I enjoy seeing them. People say they do watch us. Why should they hide? Helen Broska says, why should they hide? Well, if they didn't, I don't know, but they are, obviously, because if they are there, they're not just coming out and going, here we are. Or again, then why don't they just do that? Why don't they just say, here we are, we've been watching you, we know what you're doing, and we're in control. Instead, no, we're going to kind of fly around and try to not be detected. But oops, you found us. So it's just very tricky. Jeff Bull says 747s lose their wings at 350 miles an hour. Those planes were going above that speed. I'm not sure 350, because we travel in 747s. I think they go much faster than that, maybe 500 miles an hour or 600. I'm not sure. But it's very interesting how these things happen. But again, one of the things is that, yes, and Angela said they would probably send drones, not manned ships. That's interesting. So maybe they're drones. But again, think about, look, here's what I arrived at years ago, because I actually studied. And you want to understand something. I don't think it's possible. I'll just say this. Well, I don't want to say I don't think it's possible, but if we're just talking about being in a craft and flying, like, for example, Star Trek kind of thing. Again, I'm not going to say it's impossible, because, like, for example, in Star Trek, they had this thing called the warp, where they would fly at the speed of light. But again, this is something that's so far beyond anything we can think of. But one of the things we have to realize is that what was I doing here? Okay, is that the distance that we're talking about is so far. Even the distance to the nearest star, which is Alpha Centauri, I think 4.5 light years away. 4.5 light years away. If we were to travel something like even like 100 times faster than anything we've ever developed, maybe I think it was like 100 times faster, we would get there in like 10,000 years. Like, we don't understand how far. Think of how far light travels in 4.5 years, and that's 4.5 light years. Again, it takes the light of the sun 8 minutes to get to us, right? at something like, for example, I think the craft Voyager flew, by the time it left the solar system, maybe 100,000 miles an hour, 60,000 miles an hour, something like that. But it was pulled by gravity through pure space with no resistance. And that's like at maybe 60,000 miles an hour. It would take us literally something like 10,000 years just to get to the nearest star. So the distances are so vast. Again, anything that would fly here in a ship, you have to think of what I'm saying, because anything that would fly here in a ship and a craft that's maybe moving, again, if it's moving at the speed of light, it would be 4 years to get here, right? Now, if we get in the Star Trek world, warp 10 is 10 times the speed of light. Okay, so then it would be, even 10 times the speed of light would be 6 months. So again, crafts, it's a very different thing. And again, I think about these things, try to do like scientifically, and it's very tricky. So what I think about with aliens is that it's not some kind of aircraft or spacecraft that they're in. It could be, again, because I'm using my limited mind, and I completely acknowledge it. There was a great movie that written by a novel based on Carl Sagan, where it was all time travel, and the spaceship itself was a time machine. The spaceship, it wasn't just a time machine, it was a space machine, a time and space machine. So you would get in it, and it would program you to move through, again, like a wormhole kind of time-space continuum to arrive at another world, so that by the time you left, it wasn't 10,000 years ago, and it's an entirely different civilization and everything else. So that's the method I think that would be deployed. But again, at that point, if they're that advanced, why are they flying around in ships we can see? So this is the stuff I think about. Anyway, get a little off, but these are the things to ponder, because I don't just take it lightly. And I think a lot of people do. They'll say things like, "Oh, aliens are protecting us," and I don't think that's wrong. It could be true for sure. It could be that, but I'm not sure. I think it's that way. I'm not sure that I think it's that they're flying around in spacecraft. So I'm not really sure what I think the UFOs are. And I'm not really sure I think it's aliens flying around that look like in the movies and stuff. And I think if it is something like that, it's more dangerous. I think that would be something more like Independence Day or Mars Attacks. The best movie about aliens that are just completely out to kill us is Mars Attacks. It's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen, actually. And I don't even see a lot of movies, but that was pretty funny. So very interesting in that sense of all of the disclosures that are possible right now, all of the potential conspiracy theories that are maybe going to be revealed and going to come out, and that we should be sort of aware of. And of course, when I saw all that today, it's totally eclipse. Lunar nodes, Rahu and Ketu are literally aliens. They're the alien part of life, because they're the part of us that's not on this earth, and our senses and all that. So anything that has to do with aliens, outer space, is Rahu and Ketu. I did a few years ago. I'm actually a great Star Trek: The Next Generation fan. It's one of the only TV shows I ever watched. It was such a good show. Picard and Number One and Data and Geordi. And I did a video several years ago where I took each of the characters from Star Trek: The Next Generation and assigned them to planets. And Rahu and Ketu were aliens. Rahu was the Borg. If you know Star Trek, Rahu was the Borg. This kind of hive mentality, which is also kind of like insects. Because Rahu is very much also like, Rahu is actually related to insects, especially, anything like spiders and bees and that kind of sting you and are, so Rahu would be related to the Borg, and Ketu was related to Q. If you know the character called Q, he was like already like an enlightened being who was, he kind of looked at humans as these kind of little play toys, these kind of playthings. He had total bitterness and cynicism for humans. He would always play with Picard and the crew like they were little insects that he could just kind of play with. Real disdain for humans and their sort of pettiness and their unevolved level. So Rahu and Ketu were the Borg and the Q, who was part of the Q continuum, which were a bunch of, basically enlightened beings that were actually one with the universe. But Q himself was a particularly snarky entity who was one with the universe, but just saw how inferior human beings were and would just goof around with them all the time and play with them to try to help them evolve. But he would always put them in very, very jeopardizing situations. So anyway, these are a few things that I were sort of talking about, and a few things that I thought were really quite poignant to point out. And rather than just have it be all the darkness of the potential, war and stuff, there's also a lot of very interesting, fascinating stuff going on. And for spiritual people like me, and hopefully like you, fascinating times right now to watch our paradigm shifting, watch the politics and the religion and the beliefs and again, especially wherever the Rahu Ketu axis is in your chart and in your life, there are huge shifts happening right now. And so this is, it's very ripe with transformation. Again, we can get really hooked into the fear and the stress and worry behind it. But again, I think that especially now that Mars is getting further away from Rahu and is going to be going into Cancer where it's debilitated and less explosive potentially, that bodes well for what could be coming. I hope we've averted some some hot conflict, especially in Iran. It's a very dangerous situation. And, thinking some of that is going to be avoided. And if people have some questions about what I talked about, especially, I could answer them here. Nitu says, I love Q, best character ever on Star Trek The Next Generation. Yeah, he was great. I love Star Trek The Next Generation. And that was, one of my favorite, in fact, maybe my favorite TV show ever. Astrologia says, so Sam, do you think it might inspire us to have visions of the future, like futurism revival? Do I think it? I don't just think it. I know it. It's happening, isn't it? Look at all of the futurism revivals that people are envisioning. Again, notice this right now. Notice how in the midst of these kinds of things, again, what I think is unfortunate maybe is if you don't have these kind of things in your life. For example, if you're not going to spend time with teachers and gurus and in spiritual circles or involved with healers and great teachers, or you're not looking into these things and plugged into these things yourself, then you're just plugged into all this darkness of the world. So one of the things that this is showing you, it's time for you to seek that out, because it's seeking you out. And it's all around you, Yes, it's amazing, right? Astrologia. Yeah, and so it's very much seeking you out. And this is why we are having all these visions and there's so much emergent technology and things that can save the climate, save the planet. We can save this. We can still turn this around for sure. The old guard is not going quietly. The old business interests, the stupid old people that want to just hang on to their paradigm and steal it from the rest of us, but it's not over. We're not going to give up, right? The next generation is coming, and not just Star Trek The Next Generation, but the next group of children who are growing up, who were born, think of someone who was born on 9/11, they're 18 now, right? They never knew the world before that, right? I knew the world 30 years before that. 40 years before that, or whatever it is. And so the next generation is coming and they see things very different. And so, yes, that is what's happening right now. Futurism revival, absolutely. It's definitely there. Jalari Ghana said, I miss Guinan. I don't like Neil. Yeah, I never got into the other Voyager. Yeah, Guinan was great as well. I couldn't decide who Guinan would be. So I almost made Guinan Ketu. Guinan was almost Ketu, but then I said, no, it's got to be the Q. Because Guinan also came from another kind of source. But the reason it's Q is because Q had this disdain, this rejection, this hostility toward the stupidity of people, of humans and the crew. And that's totally Ketu. It wasn't just that Q was brilliant and knew it all and had it all figured out and wanted nothing to do with all the stuff of the universe. He actually didn't. But he had this hostility toward the stupidity of all the people. That's a very good metaphor for Ketu, whatever he's influencing. It's this utter rejection of the incompetence and the foolishness of all the people. Whereas Guinan was maybe more the compassionate side of Ketu. But Q was just not having it. He wasn't playing around. So those of you who've never watched it, do yourself a favor and go on Netflix and watch K2, Star Trek The Next Generation, especially start with like season number 3, when Beverly came back. By the time of season 3, the first 2 were still also good. But by season 3 and through the next like 5 seasons or something, it was like a movie every week, like a great produced movie with well-developed characters and great stories. And I mean, just it was always a great, always brought up very poignant issues, great acting. Patrick Stewart was great. The man who played Data was, to me, the most fascinating character. I mean, it was this machine who was trying to be human. In some ways, he was almost the most human because he had such an innocence. And I mean, and the way that the actor played that, his name is Brent Spiner, was just incredible. All the characters were so well developed. Worf was fantastic. Beverly Crusher was amazing. Of course, Patrick Stewart was a Shakespearean actor who played, Captain Picard. So it was high art. I don't know if you have anything like that on TV anymore. Probably not. I don't watch. And that's actually one of the only things I ever watched on TV, by the way. But anyway, so yeah, Worf is Mars. Yeah. So I'll go through it. Here it is. Now, I also tried to pair them. So for the Next Generation fans, I also tried to pair it. Now, pair them up. Now, you would think that because the captain is the captain and he's sort of like the king, that it would be the sun, but it's not. And I'll explain. So Patrick Stewart was Saturn. Again, now you can see, oh, yes, the older one, Saturn, the authority. Number 1 was the sun. Riker was the sun, right? He's gregarious, powerful, young figure. The moon was Troy. Because remember, Riker and Troy, they were like sun and moon. And of course, Troy was also the empath, right? The betazoid who could read everybody's heart and emotions. So Riker and Troy were paired as sun and moon. And then, of course, the captain was paired with Nurse Beverly. Beverly Crusher was Venus. She was so beautiful. She was so Venus. She's the nurse and the doctor, right? So she's the nurse. And Saturn and Venus are also paired, right? So if you remember, Picard and Beverly had this history where they were paired. So Saturn and Venus get along really well. Sun and moon. Data was, of course, Mercury. Data, he was the genius, the brilliant one. Mars was Worf. That left Geordi, and the planet that's left is Jupiter. So again, that was a little tricky. He was kind of Jupiter by default, but it still works. Because, if you remember, Geordi, he was always very generous and magnanimous. He also, he was the engineer, right? He was the engineer, which actually has a lot more to do with Mars and whatnot. But he kept the ship going where it was going, and Geordi was always had some sort of way of getting them out of the soup a little bit. Very benevolent figure. And then you had Rahu was the Borg. Again, because now we got the enemies. Now we have Rahu and Ketu are like the Asuras. And Rahu was the big enemy. Or I'm sorry, the Borg was the big enemy. They were like the hive collective mentality, right? So that was Rahu, kind of the shadow, kind of, chasing them around. the one that could destroy the whole empire, right? And then Q was Ketu. Of course, both of them were very dangerous enemies. I don't know how many times Q was going to like destroy the whole Federation just by playing with them, or all of them would get killed by Q because he just didn't care. So that's how I paired them. So that's how it worked out. But it was really fun to do it. So Angela says, haha, yeah. So I think it's good the way it worked out, and it was not a coincidence that there wound up being 9 like main figures. I don't think I left anyone out, but so I asked for questions. I'm looking to see if anyone asked them. If people did have asked questions, you could ask them if you want, but looks like we don't have a lot of questions here about what I talked about. So yeah, the thing is that the one question was thinking that we were going to turn things around, and yeah, that's a big part of what's going on. There are people that really inspire me who do great work, who are not cynical. I'm not cynical. We have a lot of really, difficult and dangerous possibilities right now. We're moving through a very dangerous time in our world, and I have hope that we'll get through it. And we have this whole cycle that we're dealing with. And the real benefit here is to really connect with that higher purpose and really learn how these things work, and not just, sort of be triggered and whatnot. One of the things I'm doing right now as well, and I had it here, now I don't see it, is right now I'm teaching an upcoming course on the lunar nodes that people should really check out. And if people wanted to even attend and register for it, let me put this in the thing here. Where is it? Where am I? Here it is. I just put a link in there. If people wanted to attend even this week, you get a free class this weekend where I talk about some of the very, some of the deeper indicators, especially for healing the lunar nodes, which is extremely important. Healing the lunar nodes and not just being triggered by whatever it is that we are, sort of dealing with. As you see, I have this here. There's one thing people don't really understand, how the lunar nodes are connected to the Kundalini and the chakras. So I'm going to be I'll be giving this weekend, it'll be on Saturday, June 22nd, overview of the nodes and the Kundalini, how that works mythologically and practically. I'll give you a hint. The story of creation called the Samudra Manthan is when Rahu had his head cut off, and then Ketu was the rest. And the truth is that this is all related to the Kundalini, which is also a serpent. And the serpent has been cut off, just like we've been cut off from our deeper energy source. And there's a direct correlation between Rahu and having his head severed, and us in this lifetime, and the rest of the Kundalini and all the chakras and Ketu. This is extremely powerful. It's extremely powerful that you understand the symbology of that story, and especially how it relates to the Kundalini and Rahu and Ketu, and why they work the way they work. And the connection of the nodes to the chakras and their lessons, again, very powerful, how the nodes work and energize and, sort of disrupt, but also inspire the planets toward higher consciousness, just like we're talking about here. And then how and why the nodes lead to metaphysical healing. They're some of the most healing parts of the chart. Again, most astrologers, frankly, just drop the ball on this. it's confusing. And again, I'm not trying to be critical, but often it's just all the negative stuff and the bad stuff and all. But the metaphysical healing is so powerful. And again, they are the metaphysical parts. Meta means extended physical. They extend the physicality beyond just the senses. That's why they're related to things like aliens and ghosts and things you can't see through your senses. And again, the metaphysical healing of Rahu is different than that of Ketu, right? As we just said, Rahu is the Borg, Ketu is Q. So how the healing of the nodes is mainly shown and awakened through their nakshatras. Often when people have planets in the nakshatras, that's how you see the awakening, often in people's lives. Of course, dasha cycles and whatnot, but you really see a lot of that awakening in their nakshatras. A lot more on the nodes. And then there's also an open Q&A with me on this weekend class. And again, you just go to that page there, and then you click, and then you register right here. You just check out there. It's only $179. That's for the full weekend course, Saturday 6th and 7th, Sunday, July 6th and 7th, or at your convenience if you can't attend in real time. So these are recordings that you'll have for the rest of your life. This is how I do these online seminars now. They're live. You can show up live. You can ask me questions while I'm teaching rather than having to go to a conference. Again, on this page, I have all the stuff that I'm going to be teaching on that weekend course. Healing myth, toxicity or purification, blindness and ignorance, everyday psychosis. These are all the things that the nodes really bring out in our life. Fated connections, your parents, lovers, most of the deep entanglements have a strong connection to the nodes. Sex, drugs, and power. Many of the unconscious power plays, sexual dominance, charisma, escapism, are seen by the nodes. Kundalini, goddess awakening, tracking the serpent as it bites and heals. These are just some overall themes that I'm going to be talking about. You even see that I have this symbol of the caduceus here, which is really a symbol of the nodes and the Kundalini and the goddess. So again, this is really powerful stuff. And so I really invite people to, learn this stuff and invest some time in learning it. And again, this is all kinds of stuff that you can understand. It's the original shadow work is what the nodes are really bringing into our life. So, I definitely invite people to check that out. And there's the link again. People asking a few questions here, saying some things. Hang on a second. Let's take a little drink here. So people saying, yeah. Oh, yeah, Alpha Omega says, I didn't know you taught Donatella Reebok. Yes, she's fantastic. She's fantastic. And so wanted to see that it was actually asked by, Roxanne said, do you include Rahu as a planet in the Jaimini? You said Atmakaraka system. It's actually called Charakaraka scheme. But yes, I do, because it says that if there are any planets in the same degree, you include Rahu. And there's almost always planets in the same degree. And the other thing is that if you don't have 9 Charakarakas in that scheme, you wind up with 8. And then the same Karaka for the son is the one for the mother. So then the mother and the son get combined with 8 Charakarakas, which frankly just doesn't make sense. It's not that it doesn't make sense, but of course I also have researched this. And I don't think I've ever seen a chart where there wasn't 2 planets in the same degree. So that automatically always puts Rahu as part of the scheme. And I don't see why we would have the same Charakaraka for the mother as the son. They're obviously different things. So again, just not seeing it, right? So so people, prescribing mantras, someone asked, is there a mantra for a good mantra for July 2nd? Look, these kinds of things, the best mantra is the one you will say. again, people can say, yeah, say this one, say that one. Look, you can say any mantra is good, especially one you will say. And that's not being sarcastic. That's just recognizing that mantras should be connected to your deity and your spiritual practice. Like I just said earlier, if you don't have a spiritual practice right now, and you don't have a mantra that you say, then what's more important now is that you get connected with spiritual practices, spiritual guru and master and system. And again, the best mantra, if you don't have one, isn't really even a complicated one. It's Om. Om is the universal mantra. Om. That's the best. That's the simplest. Om. You could say Om with your breath. You can say Om as you inhale, Om as you exhale, mentally. That's called Manasa Japa, saying it mentally in your mind as you inhale and exhale. That's the simplest mantra. You could say it all the time. It has nothing to do with an eclipse in Ardra or anything else. We should be saying mantra all the time. We should be saying our guru mantra all the time. We should be saying the mantra of our beloved deity all the time. To say, well, now that this thing is coming, what mantra should I say? Again, it kind of puts the wrong emphasis on it. It's like saying, okay, now that this thing is happening, I guess I should brush my teeth. No, you should brush your teeth every day. And you wouldn't not brush your teeth if you want to keep having teeth. If you want to have a mind that is clear and not just running amok all over the place, you should be saying the mantra. And I use this example because it's the same example, because your mind needs to be purified, and the mind is not. Your mind is usually resonates through the lower gunas of rajas and tamas rather than the sattvic vibration. So people who aren't interested in that, that's fine. But again, when people are interested in spiritual development and ask about things like mantras, it's important to give the overall context, because honestly, and again, just to be very clear, giving someone a mantra to say on an eclipse is almost, it's not only counterproductive, it's harder. And again, it doesn't mean people shouldn't do it, because often maybe these are times when they develop the need for a practice because they're so stressed out or whatever it might be. But again, have to be vigilant to understand this whole process of mantras and this and that and what we're really tapping into, right? Mantras become a kind of, I'll do this little thing, and it's actually something that we should be doing all the time. So, again, the best mantras is the one that you'll say, whatever that is, which is, again, I'm also saying this to people that already have a practice. If someone already has a practice with a guru, that's the mantra you say, always. If you don't have that, you should get that. If it's not from a guru, it should be from your beloved deity. There's no shortage of mantras. And, so that's the point. James Breeden said, all things are spiritual. Okay, all things are spiritual. Then I guess, again, when we say all things are spiritual, it also creates an impression that usually the next thing is, so everything I do is spiritual. Okay, then I guess killing people is spiritual. Again, you have to be careful with this kind of relativism. When it comes to things like yoga and practices and evolving consciousness, all things aren't spiritual, okay? Eating, 3 gallons of ice cream is not really what one would call spiritual, okay? It's called gluttony, and it doesn't raise your vibration. So, again, this is often what happens in the kind of a sort of new age approach to things, where because we've been sort of conditioned to not follow teachings or teachers, and especially in this new age now where we're all, quote, spiritual, we tend to make everything relative, and then nothing changes. So in that case, okay, that's great. Then you don't have to do anything. Then I guess you're fine. But for those who really understand that, I would have to say, honestly, all things aren't spiritual in the sense of spiritual development. We do things like yoga and mantras because they elevate the vibration in the mind so that we're more connected to the source. So that's why I would say that Everything's not spiritual for a spiritual aspirant. In fact, for someone who is really aspiring to develop their spirituality and connect their limited nature to the cosmic nature, almost nothing is spiritual. Pretty much everything we do takes us out of our spiritual truth and takes us into the world where we lose ourselves and we become attached to things that are not real. So I appreciate the sentiment, and I agree with you in principle, but in practice, I think that's not realistic for someone who wants to develop and evolve spiritually. Roxanne said, is your class this weekend on Zoom? Yes, the free class, it's a bonus that you can get if you register for the full course. So again, I posted the link. So you can click the link and look and see. That link takes you where I describe the free class I'm doing this weekend for people who register. So you have to register for the weekend. So it's for people that register for the full weekend, which will be like 10 to 12 hours of teachings on the lunar nodes. And so for those who've already registered and those who do register, they're going to get a free class this weekend. And the regular Zoom class, the full course on the nodes, will be in a couple weeks, on July 6th and 7th. So, whoops, go back here. July 6th and 7th. So that's you should be seeing this now. What do we got here? All right. So anyway, but that's what we that's what we'll be doing with that. And yeah, the full course is on Zoom. If you can attend in real time, that's great. But if not, with all the Zoom courses, they are they're recorded, and those recordings are available for the rest of your life. So again, I do it this way because people can show up in real time and be engaged while I teach, ask questions in real time. If you can't show up in real time, you get the recordings and you have them forever. And it's much better than anything else. Roxanne, you're not going to do it. You always do this stuff. You're always like, oh, I'm going to do it. I already know you're not going to do it. So I'm answering this for everybody else because I'm sure you won't. Anyway, so we do have a, so it's been going for a while, and I'm glad people showed up, and I hope this was helpful to see and to really check in with the astrology of the day. And it's certainly something that we have to look forward to, a lot of the spiritual growth and changes that are coming, but we also, again, have a lot of shifts that are happening. And last thing I should say is your prayers and spiritual intention is very important now. Praying for the well-being of the world, praying for peace everywhere is very important. And I will actually type in the mantra that we say with my guru, that she has us say, and we say it 3 times. And this is not for your benefit, it's for the benefit of world peace. And this world peace, of course, benefits us. It's very easy for us who aren't in the firing line to not know how we all benefit. And the mantra is Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. You could say it over and over again. I was just with Amma in LA, and we said Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu at every gathering. We would say it 9 times, but you could say it endlessly. And this is a great healing mantra, and it means is may all beings everywhere in all the different lokas or world be happy and peaceful. Lokaha samastaha sukhino bhavantu. 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 Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.